Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of TC Live. It's always a pleasure to have you guys here, listening to us, listening to the experts that we invite onto our lives every week. So please welcome. Really excited to be here. Really going to have, really looking forward to an interesting conversation today with my guests. So just quickly to just let you know that TC Live is brought to you by TechCabal and TechCabal Insights. TechCabal being the publication and TechCabal Insights being our data and events and research arm. TechCabal speaks to the business and human impact of tech and innovation in Africa and we do this through high quality articles, reports, and events like this. We also publish the TC Daily newsletter, which is a comprehensive roundup of tech news and events across Africa. If you're not subscribed to it, the link to do so will be posted in the chat room, so you can do so you can sign up right away. And this event is, as I mentioned earlier, organized by TechCabal Insights in partnership with EBANX. TechCabal Insights is our events, research, and data analytics arm. We're an Africa-focused digital economic consultancy that leverages big data to help startups, investors, operators, big tech companies, governments, and other ecosystem players on and off the continent to answer specific questions and implement key interventions. And our partner, EBANX, is an integrated international financial services company offering an end-to-end payment solution across the entire e-commerce transaction flow. It also helps international businesses to grow faster in Latin America, offering a local payments experience for your customers. And very interestingly, my two speakers that I have today for today's live are from EBANX. I have with me Wiza Jalakazi and Juliana Etcheverry. Wiza Jalakazi is Director, Africa Market Development at EBANX. He is an international business development expert specializing in the setup and operations of high-performance technology startups across Africa, often sharing moments from his journey on Twitter. His career experience spans 13 years and 16 African countries, founding and building tech startups across industry verticals in the B2B and B2C space. And Juliana Etcheverry is the Director of Strategic Payments Partnerships at EBANX. She leads all the strategic expansion of EBANX in 18 Latin American and African countries, ensuring the best synergy between the company and players in the payment, digital commerce, financial, and fintech ecosystems in the region. Wiza, Juliana, it's really a pleasure to have you here. Good morning.
Good morning. Greetings from Cape Town.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Very excited.
Yeah. I wanted to say hi also from down Montevideo in Uruguay. Pleasure to meet you.
Nice. So that's where you are. Yeah. Welcome to today's live. And of course, to everyone in our audience, my name is Kelechi Njoku. I am Deputy Newsroom Editor here at TechCabal, and it's really my pleasure to host today's edition of the live. So before we jump into the conversation proper, I will just walk you through the structure of today's session. So we've already had our introductions, and next thing we're going to do is to have a discussion between me and Wiza and Juliana for 30 minutes, where I ask questions and they provide answers to these questions. And then right after the discussion section of this of the live, we're going to have a 20-minute Q&A where I will pick or select questions from the audience and pass them across to Wiza and Juliana, and they will discuss these questions. Now, some of these questions are going to come from the Q&A box, and some are already questions that the audience already sent earlier before today. And then after that, we're going to have 5 minutes of closing remarks all around, last words and all of that. And then we are going to say our goodbyes, hopefully having gained insight and being educated by the both of you. In terms of some other aspects of housekeeping, and this is mostly for our audience, I'm going to continually send you reminders about about putting your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat room. If you put it in the chat room, we're going to miss it in the Q&A box. And also, at some point during the conversation, you're going to see a prompt to fill out a survey to tell us how you feel about this conversation and how we can improve subsequent editions. And it's not just me who's here. I'm only a moderator. I have other people, my colleagues, who are helping to make this a success. I have the chat room moderator for today, who is Victoria Olaonikbekun. Post-production and article recap, Victoria Olaonikbekun. And also on the social media and comms team, I have Bright, Ucha, Victoria, and Mobolaji. Also for event coordination, the person who makes all of this possible, Eniola Soshan, and for quality control, Lanre Oduowo. Thank you, everyone. And so without further ado, let's get into the conversation. Wiza and Juliana, I feel like maybe we shouldn't start too cold. So by answering exam questions just yet. So maybe just tell me how you're doing, what's going on, what's interesting.
I can say I'm having my morning coffee.
Okay.
It's 7:30 a.m. here, so
oh my God,
good morning from my side.
Yeah, it's 10:37 where I am. And how about you, Wiza?
It's 12:30 for me, and I'm at Cape Town Airport. I am boarding in 53 minutes. So it's
I mean, kudos to you, because I couldn't do that. If I'm traveling, I'm anxious. I'm not scheduling anything before I travel. So wow.
Otherwise, I'm good. Just having some internet issues. I think now it's stable. All good.
Okay, cool. So I hope that your internet is kind to us throughout this conversation, and we're just going to get to it quickly. So really, thank you so much for sharing about your day. I'm glad everyone is doing fine. So my very first question for you guys in this conversation, and just a reminder to everyone, what we're discussing is we're unlocking hidden opportunities in African payments, and we're looking at lessons from Latin America. That is the topic for today. So my very first question to you is, and this is for Juliana, can you share an overview of the current state of payments infrastructure? Okay, no, actually, this is for both Juliana and Wiza. So Wiza, I first want to understand from you, what's your take on what's an overview of the current state of payments infrastructure in Africa and the specific challenges it faces compared to a region like Latin America?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll touch on the Africa side.
Yeah.
I'm going to let Willie touch more on the Latin side. I think generally there's been a lot of development in recent years, but you find that a key issue is fragmentation. So Africa is the most economically fragmented region in the world. We have the highest number of countries of any continent. And in each of these countries, there are multiple payment methods that all work very differently from each other. And in order for businesses to get a good coverage, they have to have coverage for all of these different payment methods. Apart from this, these payment methods are not always interoperable. Nigeria seems to be one of the few exceptions where, you can easily send everything via bank transfer on top of the NIBS rail. If you try to do this in Malawi, you will see shege, as they say. So those two issues, I think, really are really key when describing the landscape. But I do think it's also worth mentioning that a lot of progress has been made in a very short period of time. 20 years ago, a lot of these payment methods didn't exist. And the uptake in some of the countries is actually really incredible. Yesterday, I was hearing from the head of Safaricom and M-Pesa, Juliana Etcheverry, at a presentation here in Cape Town, that M-Pesa now moves 70% of Kenya's GDP, but 70.
Yeah.
So I think some countries are doing much better than others. And Huli can compare and contrast with LATAM much better than I could.
So Huli, what do you think?
Absolutely, but I think there are lots of similarities. As Wiza was mentioning, fragmentation. We've seen, and we still see lots of fragmentation throughout LATAM and the Caribbean. Not only from a geographical point of view, we are talking about 30 countries, and each of them with their own landscape, their own regulatory aspects, which is similar to what we've seen in Africa. But then when we deep dive more into what has to do with the payment trends in Latin America, for instance, we've seen a very low credit card penetration, which I believe is similar to what we've seen in Africa. In Latin America, the credit card penetration is around 28%, while in Africa it's around 3%. So we've seen that people have been like relying on alternative payment methods mainly to purchase for goods and for services. And this is like the way they're used to purchasing in their day-to-day lives. And there is this same similarity, like low financial inclusion, low traditional financial inclusion, but an overwhelming and growing digital access due to the mobile penetration that we've seen. So in this sense, I believe that these are the main similarities: fragmentation, the low credit card penetration, and of course, how people turn to alternative payment methods and now instantaneous payment methods, which are playing a key role. But let me add, I think that aside of that, from a more macro perspective, we can see that innovation is booming. And this is due to this diverse payment landscape. We've seen that Latin America has been fostering innovation across all the continent in payments, just like Africa. And at the end of the day, in rising markets, like the backbone is the digital economy of everything that occurs in terms of innovation. So yeah, I think that's maybe the similarities that we're seeing between the two regions.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say about similarities, and I think you've touched a bit on this, but I'd like some expansion on my next question. So, which is so what trends and consumer behaviors are you seeing in your region in Latin America, Juliana, that you would say are pivotal for achieving success, and how are these likely to influence the future landscape of payments? So I'm talking of success in terms of, payments.
Yeah, sure. Again, I think that Latin American consumers increasingly prefer to use, as I mentioned, alternative payment methods to buy. And the more secure and faster and like real time that these transactions can be done in a seamless experience, the better. I mean, this is something that Latin Americans have been adapting and adopting hugely. Today in the morning, I was just looking at some news from Pix Brazil, which is this instant payment method that was launched by the Central Bank of Brazil. And they were celebrating today the 3 years of the launch of Pix, with 150 million consumers and more than 4 billion transactions done throughout the last month. So the traction that this type of payment method has got is tremendous. And this has a lot to do with what I'm telling you, this instantaneous, real-time confirmation. I'm always saying we are used as humans now that we want everything right now, instantaneously. You want to buy something and you want it delivered ASAP. So this is the same experience that we want with payments. We don't want to go through a huge, long, trail of complex experiences. But still it's true that still in Latin America, we have this cultural fear, and cash has been key. And it's still important. So people are still also very much dependent on the use of cash for transacting. So for instance, in Peru, we've seen that like the use of cash vouchers still remains like in a 19% of the share, while in Mexico it's about 10% of the share. Brazil, it got lowered due to the launch of Pix, now with 9% of share. And I believe that this preference for cash usage, cash vouchers, it's as I mentioned, it's a cultural adoption that we've had in the region for quite a long time. It will take time to like eliminate it from our day-to-day experience. But I think that everything related to this innovative solutions, digital solutions, are slowly like taking cash away from these payments experiences. Basically, that's it. I mean, I have seen just another small example. There's this big, huge store of conveniences in Mexico called Oxxo, where people go and get their Coke or their, soap, whatever, but at the same time, they go and they pay for their bills. And just recently, this chain of convenience store, which is huge in Mexico, Oxxo, they launched what they call Oxxo Pay, which is same experience. You need to actually go to the store and pay in cash, but the confirmation is now in real time when it used to be a batch confirmation. So this, let's say, legacy old systems are also adapting to this new wave of instantaneous confirmation, real-time experience.
Yeah, thank you so
I let you, Wiza, mention about Africa.
Yeah, thank you so much, Juliana, for sharing that. So, Wiza, Juliana has just shared extensively, what trends and, customer behaviors we're seeing in Latin America, that's, are contributing to, sort of revolutionizing and building its payment infrastructure. Are there any trends you identify with from what she said that you think we can leverage or bring into the African payment system?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we shared is very similar again to Africa. I think there's key things. The instant confirmation and instant availability of the transactions is very key. Whereas Mexico has Oxxo Pay and vouchers. Here in South Africa, you have got one voucher, which is increasingly becoming very popular. If you look at the major supermarket chains in South Africa, you going to Pick and Pay, you go into a ShopRite, you're going to see a real money market where you can do different types of financial transactions. It's very interesting that I think it's when you think about a financial revolution and digital finance, we think about people transacting on Cash App or transacting on blockchain. But what it's looking like for a lot of people is like, you go with a piece of paper and you have your Oxxo voucher or your one voucher and you make a payment for something. And, it's like you go to a physical agent in Nigeria, you go to your POS, you need to have like a POS guy now, I think. Almost everyone has a POS guy, right? And the POS guy comes to you and the distribution paths are looking very different. I think one other trend that I've identified for Africa is that there is an inverse relationship between cost and adoption. So the lower you can make your transaction fees, the faster people can start to consider taking up your digital financial service. There are obvious exemptions, of course. For example, M-Pesa in Kenya is not the cheapest financial service in the world, but it's definitely got very high uptake. But now if you look at other markets and what's happening, especially on top of the mobile wallets, say, for example, in Nigeria, the lower the transaction fees, the better it is for consumers. And in terms of driving adoption, in terms of it being good for business, I don't really know. I don't have a very strong opinion there. But, you notice that in Nigeria now, the idea of paying for, a bank transaction, if you don't get like at least 20 or 25 free transfers a month, is not something that's very, very exciting. And finally, I think the other key trend is that some of these payment methods are being used to bridge the online and offline world. So if you look at a specific vertical like mobile games here in South Africa, very similar to what we see in Peru. So if you go to like a physical store, like a Discam or Checkers, you can actually find physical gaming vouchers for like services like Apple, iTunes, Steam, Xbox Xbox Live, PlayStation Plus, and it's a pretty big market. Just in South Africa alone, there's an estimated $236 million that's generated every year from just gaming revenue. And you'd think that somebody who's sophisticated enough to be able to, buy a voucher for an online service like PlayStation Plus means that they probably use the internet a lot and maybe they have a card. But no, for some reason, people just want to go into the supermarket and buy this thing alongside, all the other groceries that they're getting. So it's very, very fascinating to see, and it's quite clear that there are trends that are similar, and especially when you go into specific regions, it's almost like all of us in the global south, we're the same people speaking different languages.
Yeah, that's really very interesting. So Juliana, I just want to come to you since you're in charge of strategic partnerships, and so I'd really like to understand why is that important when you are trying to build payment infrastructure across a region?
Sure. It's absolutely key. Let me start by that. Considering the fragmented nature of payments that we've seen throughout LATAM, partnerships is like the infrastructure, the elemental infrastructure of what we need in order to build a solid solution, a solid payment stack for our merchants. So these payment players have been critical for allowing these global merchants to reach end consumers. That's the first thing that I want to talk about, and I want to mention about payment strategic partnerships. So in countries of like continental proportions or even across regions, this is like a no-brainer. You through these payment partnerships will be offering stronger and more solid UX for the customers. So this way, for instance, each player can focus on what is the core of what they do and let the adjacent features to be provided by the experts in the field. Particularly in our case, we partner all type of, let's say, payment providers, acquirers, alternative payment methods as merchants. Merchants are also key part of our partnerships. And in this same logic, like we have this partnership, I like to call him like on the back end and on the front end, but we depend on them all in order for us to evolve. I always like to give a specific example. I will not mention the merchant's name, but they looked for us to launch operations in Colombia, and we were looking for acquirers in Colombia, and there were features in that market that were not attending the merchant's demand. And throughout this whole holistic full view of, okay, this merchant needs these features that are not still available in the market, we came to a solution that actually ended up impacting like the whole ecosystem, because it was better UX and better features that would not only attend this particular merchant, but the full ecosystem would like leverage this solution. And this is the type of thing that honestly like makes me proud, because you are not just impacting a particular merchant, but you're improving the lives of everybody in that particular market and of the businesses in that market too. So this is the type of amazing things you can do with partnerships. And again, I think that's pretty much it on the partnership side.
Yeah, I totally see what you mean. Wiza, do you have any sort of view on how these partnerships have worked so far in Africa?
Yeah, I think again, because of the fragmentation, the hyper fragmentation, I think is a more accurate way of putting it. It's quite challenging to get people to adopt systems at scale unless you're the only player. So let's put aside outliers. Kenya and Ethiopia is an outlier. Ethiopia with Ethio Telecom is sort of like an outlier. But if you look at a market like Uganda or Tanzania or Congo, DR Congo, you see that in those countries, particularly for the mobile money systems, they are all working towards native interoperability. In Nigeria, I feel like you guys are actually spoiled because you don't know how nice NIBS has made life for you. Imagine imagine not being able to send money to certain people because they use a specific bank. Like, it wouldn't work, right? But in Nigeria, you have this state mandated layer around interoperability, which I think has been really, really crucial. In other countries, the lack of this regulator-led model around interoperability means that people have to find commercial incentives to work together, and this is where these strategic partnerships come into place. Some more common examples might be, for example, the large telco groups like Safaricom and MTN and ONAFRIC, formerly NFS Africa. So if you're sending money from Kenya to Uganda, that transaction will be handled by ONAFRIC, which is playing a role as an interconnectivity layer between all of the mobile financial service operators. And I think this is really crucial because it really does allow, like Huli said, people to do what they're good at. The business of doing cross-border transactions is not the same as running a mobile financial service in your specific country, and this is the only way that we win. I often try to remind people that despite all this hullabaloo about digital finance and all the work we've done and the billions that are processed digitally every year, over 90% of retail transactions in Africa are still in cash today. So we're not competing with anybody, we're competing with cash. And without these strategic partnerships, we will never get there.
Right. Thank you so much. So Wiza, I still have a question for you, but just a quick reminder to our wonderful audience, please just remember to put your questions in the Q&A box because I will soon get to them, and so that Juliana and Wiza can discuss these questions in our next segment. So Wiza, you mentioned something about Kenya and Ethiopia being outliers when it comes to their payments infrastructure. Of course, we all know M-Pesa and how it's pretty much just penetrated the entire payments system in that country. What do you think these two outliers got right, or is there something that helped them become successful that other payment ecosystems in the continent can emulate to get to that point?
I think there's two factors. Number one is timing. The timing was very fortunate. In the case of M-Pesa, it came in at the time when domestic remittances were a challenge. People living in urban areas were really struggling to send money home. So that was a very strong solution for that. And then secondly, and perhaps more importantly, having a strong support structure from the regulator, from the other government actors who create an enabling environment. M-Pesa enjoyed this. It wasn't always easy in the beginning. There was resistance from the banks, but when it was out there was quite a lot of support, and they really had an enabling environment. Had never been done anymore, plus the timing. I think that helps a lot. And then also the Safaricom was already a very strong homegrown Kenyan brand. I think they had a lot of trust of consumers. And now Safaricom is a conglomerate that not only does mobile services, but they also have home internet. They have an e-commerce platform. So they leverage those things. And I think those things they're very difficult to emulate. I think you need to have them. It's not like you can grow them overnight. But yeah, I think those factors really contributed significantly to the success.
Thank you so much. So my last question is for the both of you. And so from your perspective, Wiza, what are some potential pitfalls or challenges that African countries should be cautious of when applying lessons from Latin America when it comes to building our payments infrastructure?
Yeah, I think the way we Africans like to tell people that Africa is not a country, I think we should also be very wary of thinking about Latin America as a country, right? Huli can build up on this, but then
let me just interrupt you for a minute. We feel so much the same, and it gets us on our nerves when we talk about like a continent as if it were a country. But yeah, so true.
Exactly this, and I think we need to draw specific parallels between maybe specific countries, at least at the larger scale that we should do. So I might compare Brazil and South Africa in some ways. I see some similarities, and I think it's easy to glean reasonable insights between those two countries. But saying that LATAM and Africa are similar, I think, is a very simplistic way of thinking that can lead you to the wrong place. So being hyper specific about where and what we are doing, I think, is a great way to glean. The similarities are there, but we need to be as specific as possible in order to get the right results. And Huli, I'll lean on you here for specific examples in LATAM about countries that are next to each other, but completely different in nature. Maybe you can share some examples here.
Yes, Juliana, please.
Yeah. So no, let me tell you, even from the moment that you're thinking of countries which have different currency within, we're not like Europe that has its own currency. From that moment, I think that triggers this differences among countries, the differences in the regulations, in the political scenario, economical scenario. So all of this we need to consider at the time of doing businesses in each of these markets. I think that the general idea that lies is the fact that you need, again, as Wiza was saying, to take each country's nuances into account because they differ a lot. For instance, I'm in Uruguay and we have Argentina, which is next to us, and the way their ecosystem is working right now in terms of remittances and policies for that aspect are so different from what we're seeing in my home country and even around the region. So are the type of nuances that need to be considered. Now that doesn't mean that you need to consider the same specificities for the rising indicator, that more of the carpet what to take into account doing, because at the end of the day, payments are actually a reflection of the history of behavior of each consumer in each and every country.
Hi, Juliana. So you broke off for most of your answer. I did a lot of what you said, but yeah, it looks like there's some jam in your internet. But yeah, I really I got a lot of what you said about how even with the classification of these countries, lumping them into one, there's the easy assumption that their economies and payment systems work the same way or even that sometimes people forget about economic context and history surrounding these countries. So even neighboring countries can have different consumer behaviors or, payment preferences and all of that. Thank you so much, Wiza and Juliana. So now I'm just going to quickly look in the Q&A box to find questions that the audience may have dropped during our conversation. So we're just going to do this for 10 to 15 minutes. So the first question here is from the audience is, and this is for Juliana, with so many micropayment solutions coming into the market, what are the risks and how do we safeguard against fraud and others?
That's a good one. micropayments actually are very, very important. A very important solution when we think of, especially in the everything related to the creator economy and other digital verticals, as well as dynamic social media platforms, because it enables a business to exist as many, I'm thinking TikTok influencer or whomever that's in this type of platforms needs to receive this payment. So let's take, for instance, Latin America as an example, where social media and the creators economy is absolutely booming. Almost every Latin America has internet user is on social media. Like, I think that the percentage is about 90%. This is the highest social media penetration in the world. So we think that creators who drive sales of products and services, they need, and they have a huge influence into their publics. They need this payments to be done to them, to their accounts. And the main pain point is the gap that exists, which actually is payments. How do I receive the money for the content that I have created? Sometimes this payment is view-based, and it's literally cents per view that they need to receive. And that's one of the key aspects of how this key questions and challenges on how these platforms will pay for those influencers. Also, this settlement needs to be in the payment method of choice. Not all of the influencers or these content creators have access to a bank account. So then is where you think, okay, let's make sure that we can pay through digital accounts or digital wallets. And this is when the local payment methods, these alternative payment methods that I was talking about earlier, become this bridge between companies and this type of content creators. In particular, we see that this, and we call it payout, this actual action of paying this type of content creator, we call it payouts for influencers. It is expected to grow hugely in Latin America, around 60% per year throughout 2025. And it's a pent-up demand, especially in rising markets like Latin America and Africa and even India. The more solutions you have to bridge, the better. And here again, this is where partners play a key role to build this bridge and for you to deeply understand how consumer behavior works, because fraud is deeply connected to it, and preventing it is deeply connected to understanding how people consume and pay. So yeah, that's a bit on micropayments and how hard it is, but how the ecosystem has easily found solutions to solve for this.
Thank you so much, Juliana. And so that leads me to another question from still from the audience. And so this one says, and I'd like to hear from the both of you on this. So what are the types of policies, frameworks, and structures required by African governments to, revolutionize our payments system? So Juliana, I'd really appreciate your perspective as kind of an outsider, and then I'd love to hear from Wiza as well.
I will let Wiza expand more on this one, but I think that this trend that we're seeing of which is unfolding in LATAM, and I believe is also unfolding in Africa, this will be key in terms of frameworks and structures. Personal opinion, which has everything to do with stablecoin and blockchain, will also as a structural infra will be, because it's revolutionizing the payments ecosystem. But I'll pass it through to Wiza, who is the local.
Thanks, Suli. I don't know if my connection is still good. I think we're having some issues.
Yeah.
I think it's back. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would say I think there's your question is actually a hybrid question because there's now policies and then like frameworks and structures are not the same as policies. Right. So I think from a policy perspective, I think there needs to be a harmonization of standards with regards to different types of technology. There's no reason why the certification that I get to have a mobile money platform in Uganda cannot be used to obtain the same in Tanzania, given that they're all countries are belonging to the same regional economic zone, the East African community. I think there needs to be a harmonization of licensing frameworks for digital technologies so that it should be as easy to do business with one license in a region as it is to get into that one country. So you see this a lot in other areas. The telecoms industry has done a great job of standardizing the requirements for licensing, but the financial services sector, I think, still has a ways to go. And then there's that's on the policy side. In regards to frameworks and structures, I think we can take advantage of certain things. The interoperability layers that are not enough, they're not enough that exist. So we're seeing some good developments with the introduction of the Pan-African payment and settlement system. But it's still very hard for someone sitting in Nigeria today to send me in Malawi kwacha. Like you try to find someone in Nigeria who can change Malawi kwacha. Like it's a big challenge. And having infrastructure that supports this will enable us to interact more with each other as countries without necessarily relying on the US dollar as a medium for trade. And then in regards to structures, I think my dream state will be someday where there is a money transfer protocol that any fintech, any bank, any mobile money system that wants to plug into can just simply use that protocol and become a participant in a Pan-African national payment switch, right? And this is a dream for me. It's not happening today. It might not happen in my lifetime, but I think this is like the holy grail of what we could do if we were able to develop something very similar, perhaps, to what Europe has with their IBAN system. In Europe, it was a lot easier because of the single currency zone with the euro. Maybe when we get our African dinar, this might be something that we choose to explore. But for now, I think that would be great one day to have.
And thank you so much, Wiza. So I'm just going to take one more question from a member of the audience before we start to sign off. But just before then, so for our audience, you're going to see a poll. You're going to see a poll just in front of you. Please do well to take that poll to tell us how you feel about this conversation and about TC Live and how we can make it a better experience for you from edition to edition. So now this question is from Jacob Hens, and he says, how do you see fintechs in emerging markets expanding internationally over time? Are we seeing a trend towards specific country bands like Nigeria, Brazil, and Indonesia versus specific geographic regions? Did you get the question? Should I take it again?
Please repeat well.
All right. So basically he's asking, so how do you see, in terms of trends, fintechs in emerging markets expanding internationally over time? And he's asking whether you see that expansion going to specific countries, and he mentions Nigeria, Brazil, and Indonesia versus whole geographical regions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, now I got the question. Okay, cool. Willie, do you have a strong view here?
Go ahead, Wiza, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I would say I think they are obvious or seemingly obvious markets to get into when you first come into a new region that for a number of factors might be perhaps easier for you to experiment in than others. So if you take an example of, US VCs looking to invest in Africa, where do they write their first check? South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, right? If you're going to LATAM, where's an easy place to start? Maybe Brazil, maybe Mexico. And in terms of like ease of doing business, how big is the market? If you're looking at Southeast Asia, it's Indonesia, Malaysia that could be quick starting points, right? And I think that these market realities are always true, regardless of where a business is coming from. So it's not more so about, where you're coming from, but like rather, if you're going somewhere, where does it make the most sense to start, given that you're a foreigner? You need to learn what you're doing in each of those regions. And I think those are the considerations that ultimately matter at the end of the day. And each region has got its leading countries from an ease of doing business perspective.
Absolutely. I would add to what Wiza was mentioning. Also the necessity that needs to be solved in each of these markets. When we speak of emerging markets and all those that were mentioned, Nigeria, Brazil, Indonesia, would be categorized as emerging markets, there is a need and necessity to solve for a consumer pain point. And that's where I think that the fintechs find this opportunity. Then the key to make it a hit is to really understand the nuances that this markets or this consumers or this niche is going through to solve for it. So I think it makes sense to see this trend of fintechs like going into this particular markets due to, as I mentioned, the spotting out what's the difference that you can make in that market. Because at the end of the day, I believe, it sounds a bit cliche, but I believe that many of the fintechs end up making a huge statement in giving access in solving and I can think of many people, at least let's say hypothesis in other markets, and they also ended up being successful. Because at the end of the day, I think one way or the other, adjusting to the specificities of each market, the need remains more or less the same.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Juliana. And Wiza, really appreciate your sharing your thoughts and your expertise on the topic at hand. I believe everyone in the audience has enjoyed this conversation. So just before we go, again, please for the members of the audience, please fill out the post-event survey, not poll, post-event survey. You're going to see it on your screen right now. So just answer a few questions as to how you feel about this conversation and how we can make it better for you. Any final thoughts, Juliana, Wiza?
No, just thanks so much for having us. And I need to get to the gate now, so I might head offline. But this is a great conversation, and I wish we had more time.
Yeah, I completely understand. Have a safe flight, Wiza. Juliana, do you have any final thoughts?
No, thank you so much. I just want to mention something. I loved Wiza's big dream of this intercontinental way of money. I would just list one continent, looking for that this international that Wiza was mentioning for the African ecosystem, but worldwide. That would be like the biggest dream.
Very
Thanks.
true. Thank you so much. And thanks to you, EBANX for your support in putting this event together. It's been a very beautiful and very useful partnership. Looking forward to more partnerships like this, to have these important conversations about what's going on in the ecosystem in terms of our payments infrastructure and all of that. Thank you to the audience for sitting in and listening in to this conversation, also sending your questions. I'm grateful, the guests are grateful. And also, please remember to subscribe to TC Daily, which is our daily newsletter that you get 5 days a week, every weekday. Also subscribe to In a Jiffy, which is the special newsletter of the TC Insights arm of TechCabal. And thank you so much, everyone, for your time. It's been a lovely conversation, and see you around. Bye.